Well, hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live. It is programme number 14. It's great to have your company as always. And boy, another cracking programme all lined up for you. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Many companies or many employees actually have a bit of an issue when it comes to company cars. They don't know whether they should buy them. Should they purchase the car? Should they lease hire it? Should they go into the company scheme? Should they be out of a company scheme? What car should they be going after? What's the best way to finance it? The list goes on and on and on. And hopefully tonight we're going to be able to resolve all that for you. My guest this evening is the lovely Sarah Dopson. She's the fleet manager from the AA, in charge of fleet. Just to give us a bit of an insight into the AA, just how big an organisation is it when it comes to looking after their vehicles, Sarah?
We've got about 8,000 vehicles on the fleet, ranging from commercial vehicles to driving school and company cars. And
how varied is that? I mean, is it from every scale of motor vehicle all the way through to, I mean, you mentioned trucks there, but all the way through to large trucks?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting at Corsa, so a standard Corsa vehicle with dual control. So a lot of our vehicles are commissioned, which means that they've got auxiliary equipment attached to it, all the way up to your 12-tonne truck.
Right then. Now, we're going to be talking about a number of different subjects this evening. We're going to be working our way through the whole paraphernalia of what somebody should do. If you had to cut the entire programme out and go straight to the chase, what would be your key piece of advice to somebody who, well, there's different kinds of people, I know that. So let's say somebody who's working for a business at the moment, what should they be considering if they've been offered a company car?
Have a policy in place, understand whether or not they've got business use mileage or whether it's actually an employee benefit. And understanding exactly how much it's going to cost from service maintenance and also fuel.
Do you think people actually do get how much it actually costs them to have a company car?
No, I think they see the actual price of the vehicle and they forget about everything else that's included in it. So they forget the whole life cost of what that vehicle is going to cost them through the duration of the period.
I suppose the problem that people have, isn't it, is that when they look at it, depending whether they're in a scheme or not in a scheme, when they're actually looking at a company car, they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm going to save the likes of tax, and I'm going to save
insurance,
and I'm going to save, maybe I can claim back the petrol as well, and chances are if it's a company car you will be able to. But the liability of doing that is quite large, isn't it? The Inland Revenue have made absolutely certain that there is nothing for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of restrictions now around what you can actually have and what that means to the actual end driver. So for example, CO2 restrictions now, that derives what your business BIK is going to be, which is your benefit in kind taxation, and that's an absolute charge to the driver, and unless you actually understand how that's made up in that calculation, you don't know how much that's going to cost you.
So Sarah, tell me, where do you go to find this information out?
There's lots of forums that are available, HMRC website. We pay close attention to that with regards to fuel reimbursement rates, what we should be using as our reimbursement rates for the company, as well as fleet forums like Fleet News. We've got, because we're one of the top 200 fleets in the UK, there's a forum with major fleet corporates that we all discuss exactly the same topics with our peers. So you've also got ACFO, so whether you're a small fleet of 1 or a large fleet of 200, you still share the same similarities. So it's good to actually discuss those with your peers.
Do some people actually consider having a company car or having the car through their business as a bit of, not, I hesitate using the word scam because it isn't that, but do they see it as a tax advantage by having the company car and therefore trying to offset the car as an asset or whatever?
They did used to see that. I don't think it's so black and white anymore because of obviously the taxation rulings that have been put in place. So I think actually having a commercial vehicle as a company car, there is still a loophole there, but actually having a company car, the taxation and national insurance you still pay as a driver as well as a company.
So would you say there's still advantage to having a company vehicle?
Yes.
There is?
Yes, and for a business there's the importance of having a company vehicle so you can actually manage what that vehicle is and what that driver is doing. So there is a lot of companies that allow cash alternative. That means that the driver gets a value of money and then they use that to procure their own vehicle, but you don't actually know what that vehicle is. It could be 10 years old, etc. You don't know whether it's got a mobile hands-free kit. You don't know what the service and maintenance is like on it. You don't know whether it's been MOT'd. You don't know what the insurance is. So actually, if you've got a company car, at least someone's managing that for you. So it's limiting the company's risk and managing duty of care.
Well, it sounds absolutely fascinating. It sounds like it's going to be a fantastic hour with you. I'm looking forward to finding out more about where we should be going. We're also going to be talking about how to finance a vehicle too. Is that financing for somebody that is a private purchaser, or is that somebody, when it comes to financing, if you're a business?
Business. So if you're a business, there's not one package that suits all. It really does depend on the company, whether you've got a high volume of cash in the company, so you're a cash-rich company, whether it's outright purchase is the right option, so it goes against your balance sheet, in which case you depreciate that asset over a period of time, or whether you go via a contract hire route. You could also use salary sacrifice. The most common route is contract hire.
All right, we're going to be talking about all aspects when it comes to everything from contract hire all the way through to what you should be doing in your small business at the moment. And remember, this applies to small businesses all the way up to large businesses, if I'm not mistaken. So regardless of how large your organisation is, the information we're going to be giving you this evening is going to be spot on for you. And remember, we are talking to the leading motoring, the premier motoring organisation in the UK, the AA. So that's all to come this evening. Now, last week we had a really interesting programme. It was absolutely fascinating, in fact, to be honest with you. And like always, we always learn so much from the different guests that we have in there. Already, I'm looking forward to seeing what Sarah's going to be teaching me as the programme goes on. Last week, we had Steve Nichols. We were talking about social media, but not the nuts and bolts of social media. We weren't talking about the twittering, the tweets. We weren't talking about Facebook or LinkedIn in particular. What we were talking about is where social media is going and what you as a business should be thinking about when it comes to social media. How should you be planning ahead? What should you be looking at? How does social media work within the DNA of your organisation? That's what we talked about last week. If you haven't seen the entire programme, do take the opportunity to watch it. But to give you just a teeny weeny bit of a tease of how good it was last week, this is Business Connections Live with Steve Nichols.
Hi, I'm Steve Nichols from Social Media in Business, and what I really we've been talking about is social media is a revolution, and what we're looking at is effectively technology is evolving, but we're experiencing it as a revolution because it's evolving exponentially, but we're experiencing it as a revolution.
If you're into finding out what social media is all about, but in particular social media in business, then this is going to be the book for you. And unlike some of the other social media books that you find, this one truly is cram-packed with information that is going to make a difference to your business.
But really there's two levels of social media we're talking about. One is what I would call the tactical social media, and that's typically the 4 or 5 buttons you see on somebody's website. That's what you'd call tactical social media. Yeah. That's really channels in marketing sense. So it's really looking at that, how do I use those as channels to marketing? But what I'm really looking at is how do you look at social media across the whole business? So how do you bring it into the DNA of the company, across the whole company? Because really what you're talking about, social media really is about communication. Some people will probably listening to this and thinking Google Glass and wearable computer, what's that got to do with my business? The thing is, they probably thought that when the internet came out, and they probably thought that when mobiles came out, you know, when the first iPhone came out, I saw an iPhone when it first came out, and I thought I had a Razor, which was a clamshell thing, and I thought, what do I need one of those for? And I think a lot of people think, why do I need one of those? And it's almost until you've experienced it, until you've used it, you don't really know what it is you're missing. And the other thing is that mobile websites, initially when they first came out, they were really designed for a PC and a laptop. But now you've actually got to design your website so that you can actually look at it on a mobile. Now, the reason I talked about Google Glass is because now you've got to think about, okay, what happens when somebody's viewing it through Google Glass? It's a different experience, and therefore all these different devices is a different experience for the customer. And depending on your market, and again, it's very much context driven, depending on your market, who those people are, where those people are, and that's where you've got to go where they are. So it's almost like you've got to go where the party is. Now, from a business perspective, there are a number of things you've got to think about. One, start with the end in mind. What is the goal? What is it you're trying to do? So don't just look at social media for the sake of it. I must have a Facebook page, I must have this, that, and the other. What is it you're trying to do? So start with a goal. Second thing is you need to understand the broader range of things that are available. So, you know, what are the opportunities? So need to understand the opportunities, and my book is designed to really help you understand the broad array, the landscape, social media landscape. And this is a landscape that doesn't stand still. You know, in the last 2 years since my book's been out, the landscape is starting to shift, and you can now start to see the difference. So the other thing is risks. There are risks with social media. So for instance, social media will amplify what you already are. So if you're a company that's not that great, you're going to have to smarten yourself up. You're going to have to bring yourself in line so that you've got to be. You can't get away with it now. If you're in the murky world of well, there's no way around it. You've got to be good. There's just no other way around it. The other thing I would say is this is a people issue. When we're talking about communication, communication is a people issue. It really isn't a technical one. I mean, a lot of people often say to me, oh, this is my IT people, or this is my marketing department. Well, if you look at Elance, that isn't a marketing department. I mean, marketing people might use it. Sourcing, for instance, if you're doing sourcing, these are different parts of the organization. And so what you need to do is look at the whole of your organization and how that fits with it. But it's really about communication, it's about people. And the third, and I suppose the final thing, is implementation. You have to have a step-by-step method to implement.
Absolutely fantastic show, actually. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Steve Nichols, a really nice chap, and he'll be back with us in the new year. So once again, thanks to him. And if you are looking at your whole procedures or everything to do with social media within your organisation, well, then he has got a great book out, and I'll give you details of that before the end of the programme. It is Social Media in Business. Great book, Steve Nichols, fantastic job, nice bloke to boot. Also acts as a consultant as well, for that matter, and he'll come to your organisation and sort you out. But it is all about looking at how you're going to be perceived as an organisation in the future. Today, though, slightly different. We're not looking at social media. Hey, that makes a change, doesn't it? We're talking about business and company cars and what you should be doing with them. With me, I have the fleet manager, or head of fleet, isn't it? We've got to get it right, because the AA have funny old titles, don't they?
They do.
And we've got to make absolutely certain that we get it perfectly correct. Sarah Dopson. You've been with the AA, you say, a long, long time, and you've won a few awards as well, haven't you, in your time with the AA?
I have, yes. So I've been with the AA for 13 years. Roles changed over that time, but it's been fun and enjoyment.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say, absolutely. Yes, I won Fleet Manager of the Year award in 2012, which is an industry standard award, which is actually sponsored by Fleet News. Fleet News is an industry organisation which also have an industry newspaper that goes out monthly, and it just gives you hot topics, etc. So it's really good award to have, very prestigious.
Actually, I was just looking at the Fleet News website here. It really has. It's got everything on there that it gives you the heads up, doesn't it? Effectively, doesn't it? That's a really nice thing about it. You can see there, Fleet News, and what we're looking at, we've got Fleet News, you've got Fleet Van, Fleet Events, Fleet Leasing. I would imagine we're going to be talking a little bit about when it comes to. Oh, I've touched it. Therefore, we'll have a look at it now. Then. And you can see all the kind of details and also topics and information from the industry leaders that are there. Brilliant, that's good. All right then, so let's really get down to the nitty-gritty then. First of all, about the choice of vehicles.
Yes.
We're sometimes seduced into organisations. We are maybe blackmailed to come along to work for somebody, because it always sounds really nice if somebody turns around to you and says, OK, here's the vehicle that you can actually have.
Yeah.
So where do we start with that? Because I know I was talking to you, and there you are, you're the fleet manager.
I am.
But you're not taking the top car that you could actually have within the band that they allow you, are you?
No. So the ideal opportunity is to have a policy in place, in which case then your staff are actually grade levelled, which also have a car allowance. The car allowance then you can procure the car for, which we lease. So if we have a allowance that's £400 and the lease is at £400, then that particular brand group can take it. We have an opportunity in the AA that you can trade up or trade down, which means you can take a vehicle over the price limit, but you have to fund that, or you can take it under, which is a trade down to a certain level. So I actually take one under, because that will then offset my BIK tax. And
that's what's important to you, isn't it? You just want to see more pounds in your pocket, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
When you go over your price band and you actually then make a contribution to the vehicle that your company is giving you at the time, is that offset against tax, that contribution?
It is offset against tax, that contribution.
So there are still
benefits of doing it. There's still an advantage of doing it, absolutely. But you typically find most vehicles nowadays come with an awful lot of standard options, so there's very little reason why you would want to trade up over exactly what the allowance that you're actually set.
So really, your advice is to them is to actually go in there, look at the cars that are available, and the chances are that you're going to get a good car for the money that's been offered. Anyway.
Absolutely, and try and avoid as well where drivers actually try to go above their limit and get authorisation to go above their limit, because otherwise it's pointless having a policy. You want to try and make sure that you adhere to a policy so it sets the guidelines between each grade.
That's a really good piece of advice. So to maintain that
status quo.
That status quo. What a good idea that is. So. If you are selling, I mean, are there particular brands, are there particular types of car we talk? I know if you go to Fainham House, which is where the AA live in Basingstoke, outside of there you've got charging points for electric cars.
Absolutely.
Is this all a bit of a fad still at the moment? Are we there yet when it comes to that? And are there any advantages for saying to your employer, do you know what, I think the company car I'd like would be an electric car?
Well, yes and no. So if they're funding them themselves, possible. There's a possibility of having one. If it's a leased vehicle, unless the manufacturer themselves is funding the recharging and also the battery life, then a lot of lease companies are still not actually providing a rental quote for an electric vehicle. The vehicles are still highly priced in the market as opposed to their comparative models, and also they'll need the charging facility, so whether that's funded by the business or whether that's funded by the driver is a benefit to them. So that has to be discussed between their employee.
Yeah, you're an expert in this. Do you think the prices are going to come down over a period of time?
Yeah, they've started to drop, and you've got a lot of hybrid vehicles now that are from your Vauxhall, so your
Toyotas?
Yeah, your Vauxhall, your Toyota, those sort of vehicles are now within those price limits, and they're for hybrids. So they're not completely electric vehicles, but they're hybrid vehicles. You've got some Citroen C1s and smaller derivative vehicles that work, but the only difficulty you've got is that you can't be doing high mileage in those vehicles. You can't have a fair distance to go, and realistically you need a depot to be able to charge them in, especially if you're looking at it as a business use one.
We're talking horses for courses, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So if you're somebody that's on the road all the time and you're travelling from A to B, you really need to be thinking, well, actually you still need either a petrol or a diesel.
Yeah, absolutely, because if you, for example, for us, we've got an office based in Albury. An awful lot of our electric vehicles will not make it to Albury because of the distance you have to travel, so they would only do a range of about 100 miles. So unless you've got a charge in at both points of where you're going to from your A to B point, then you're not going to get home. So you need to really consider what your range is. So if you've got a range that's only operating around the major conurbations like London, and there's charging infrastructure around London, ideal, absolutely ideal. Anything outside of that is still precarious.
Do you think that the whole scope of electric vehicles is a good place to be? Do you think do you see this as the future? I mean, you're talking to the fleet manufacturers, aren't you?
Yeah, I can see it as the future, but we need to improve the infrastructure.
All right, so we've gone to a company and we've got our different bands here, the different vehicles that we've got, but what about the small business, the small SME, somebody that's starting up, he's in business for himself, or maybe a couple of people are employed. What should they be thinking about when it comes to getting the vehicle to get them on the road?
They need to consider what their job requirement is. So what do they actually need out of that vehicle? Do they need a large estate vehicle for storage? Do they need to carry equipment? Is it just for their own personal use to go backwards and forwards? Is it employee benefit? Is it a job requirement? What sort of mileage are they doing?
Whoa. Too many options.
Too many options.
So and who's looking at all those options? Is it the Inland Revenue looking at it as benefit in kind? Is it the employee who's the employer? Are they going to get hammered for giving the vehicle as well? I mean,
absolutely.
Where does it all sit?
All of them. So for an employer, they'll obviously get charged capital allowance, and they'll also be charged tax and national insurance against that vehicle, and also the allowance. But the driver themselves will also get hit with BIK insurance. There's a scheme that's obviously just come out recently, and I think that's growing inside, is salary sacrifice, which means that you can still take a vehicle which is a leased vehicle, fully maintained, including insurance, but it means that the actual payment of it comes out pre-tax because it comes out of your gross salary.
All right, so benefits are taken from absolutely everywhere then, and you've been looked at all the time.
And as I said, unfortunately not one model suits everybody. You just need to look at all the models that are available and see which one best suits your individual needs, whether you're an individual buying it or whether you're a company. In the years that you've been doing it, has it really changed a lot, the way that the whole company car deal works? Not hugely. Really? From our perspective, probably not. Albeit we've been driven down a route of more environmentally friendly green cars, only because of the CO2 emissions and what targets the CO2 emissions are driving with regards to capital allowances and the written down capital allowances.
So they're the major changes that you're actually seeing then at the moment. They're the ones that actually affect you then.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right then, so I mean that's interesting because I mean is it a bit of a minefield then for the small business owner when it comes to vehicles, or is it just something that you give to the accountant and you hope when it comes back things will be okay? I mean what kind of things are claimable back then?
I mean, there's a lot of things as well. So as I was saying about salary sacrifice, unless you actually start the scheme, you can't get it approved by HMRC. So it's a little bit of a backwards, backwards to come forward. So you actually have to put the scheme in place. Then while the scheme is actually running, you go then for HMRC approval. So which is also helped. You're helped by the likes of your Deloitte's, etc., and your taxation companies to get you over that threshold. But yeah, it is an absolute minefield.
So who do you go to? Who's the best person to talk to? Is this going to be the accountant or is this going to be a specialist?
Finance and accountants and taxation, which we've all got. We've got internal departments.
I should hope you do actually. Yes. Kind of important for an organisation like yours.
Indeed.
But for the small business owner, who would they'll turn to their accountant.
They'll turn to their accountant for that advice, and also HMRC. HMRC, the government website, also tells you a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying to me before we came on the air that the HMRC, there's a lot, easy for me to say, there's a lot of information actually sitting on that site.
There's a huge amount of information on that site, and everything's on there as well, from your guidance around company cars, what you should or shouldn't do, how to start up a scheme and policy, as well as what the reimbursement rate should be, whether they're EMAP reimbursement rates for cash alternative drivers or whether it's fuel reimbursement rates for your company car driver. So it is all on there.
What do you think the biggest single mistake is that people make then when it comes to doing this? I mean, I know that some people think that when they start a business and they have a limited company, they think the money that is in the limited company, even if it's just a one-man band, they think it's their money. They don't seem to realise it's the company's money, and when they take the money out, it's a company loan and all those kind of things, and they get into a lot of trouble with their accountant. So, I mean, do you see that kind of thing? I mean, have you had experience? Have people told you similar stories where they haven't really truly understood the way they can finance it?
Absolutely, we have seen some I've heard of some scary stories in the industry where they haven't really understood exactly either what scheme is trying to provide, or whether or not they actually outright purchased a vehicle. They didn't understand the depreciation, the fact that it depreciates so quickly, and the fact that they tried to resell that vehicle so quickly and actually lost an awful amount of money. So that's one of the benefits of actually contract hiring, because the leasing company is protecting you from that depreciation. So although it is depreciation over a number of years, the RV is set from the outset, so your rental is fixed for that period of time, whereas if you outright purchase, it can fluctuate depending on what your depreciation model looks like.
What about these, there's always this, and this isn't me now, this isn't personal experience, but it's something I've heard of, when people will look at leasing a vehicle and there is over the fixed term there is a number of mileage or miles that they can actually do, and what they do is they go for the lowest band to get the lowest amount to pay on a monthly basis. And then they just blow that away. They just go whoosh straight through it.
Yeah,
bad policy to do?
Bad policy to do. They need to be realistic from the outset of what mileage they're going to cover. Although the rental may be slightly more expensive per month, it means that you won't get hit by excess mileage charges at the back end. Excess mileage charges can be anything from 6p to 15p to 20p, and that's an awful lot of money per mile, every mile that you go over that allowance. What they also can consider, that if you're leasing a vehicle, you can actually recontract mid-term. You don't have to keep it for the duration of the term with that fixed mileage. So we've looked at the optimum, and our optimum is actually recontracting at 20 months.
Right.
And that then sets the parameters then, so you're not hit with those back-end charges at the end of the lease period.
There's a buddy of mine, and what he does, he seems to have a new vehicle every 3 months, so it's a very low mileage that the vehicle is targeted towards, and then once it hits that, I think it's something ridiculous like 6,000 or something. Wow. And the moment he hits 6,000, then the car goes back and he gets another new model. But it is quite an expensive contract to actually have, I think.
Absolutely, it's going to be, because of the short term. the short-term hire as well that you're replacing your vehicles over. So an awful lot of manufacturers have actually come out of the market where they're actually doing under 12 months because it's seen as a rental vehicle rather than an actual leased company car vehicle. The only people that that I know that tend to do that more often is actually employees that work for a manufacturer.
All right. Let's just do, I mean, we're going to get onto the how you go about financing a vehicle and the best ways about doing that. But just before we go on to that, when it comes to leasing the vehicle, is there ever the advantage just to hire the vehicle and not, you know, so you seem like you can go along to a hire company, you can hire a vehicle for a weekend, for a week, for a month, if you really wanted to. Are there any schemes out there that just allow you to hire it on an ad hoc basis? Is that a good solution?
There are schemes that do it on an ad hoc basis, and a lot of leasing companies as well will do it on a short-term rental, which typically is about 3 months. You are paying a premium for that though, so you are super loaded with that, and also the return standards when the vehicle is returned are an awful lot higher. The mileage constraints are an awful lot higher, and it's typically only best practice to use that if you are thinking about going into a longer term vehicle.
All right.
Not to continue
so really it's like an interim in other words?
an interim, yeah,
All
not
right,
to continue to use it over and over again.
Crikey, so there's a lot to consider then when it actually comes to the different types of contracts that we're looking at. It's a lot to consider about whether it's going to be right or whether it's going to be wrong for you. I mean, could you break it down just before we have our next little piece, but could you break it down so that we're into the kind of bands then where I should be? If I'm looking for an interim contract, then maybe it's just a straight rental would be okay. But just be very aware, don't get into any term of a long-term contract with that, because
Absolutely.
it could be quite stringent when you return the vehicle.
It's going to be quite costly, yes.
The next stage above that is?
Contract hire.
Contract hire. And the criteria that we should be very aware of when we're looking at that, we should be looking at the mileage. Make certain that
mileage, term. And also a leasing company will look at the back end with regards to damage recharges just to understand what that return standard is. Is it BVRLA or is it something different? And whether you've got any damage waivers in it, because again, that is an opportunity for some leasing companies to perhaps become a profit centre.
And what about these packages as well that have all the, not only the vehicle, but have all the servicing charges included as well?
It's included in contract hire, so typically contract hire will include all service maintenance.
So the only thing you'll have to cover then will be what, insurance?
Insurance and fuel.
And fuel, and that's it. And you just hand the car back at the end.
Correct. And also at the end you will get the damage recharges, so you need to be careful at that back end disposal process.
When you look at that and you talk to your friends about this, I mean, do some of them sort of stand back a little bit and they go, yeah, but I never owned the car? I mean, is that such a big deal these days about actually owning the metal?
I don't think it is. I think people actually are more excited from a company car perspective. Drivers are more excited about getting a replacement car every 3 years rather than actually owning it and having to worry about where they're going to dispose of it, who they're going to dispose it through, what value they're going to get for it, how much they have to repay a separate loan back for it. So I don't think it's too much of an issue.
All right then. I tell you what, absolutely fascinating, isn't it? I mean, if you've been thinking about getting yourself a brand new company car, I mean, and you're looking for the information, it's quite obvious that Sarah is a mine of information, and hopefully we're going to be mining that information all the way out so that she'll be completely exhausted by the end of the hour. Incidentally, if you're wondering where Sarah's from, she is from the AA. Of course, they've got one of the most popular and busy websites when it comes to traffic. The thing that is fascinating about the AA, of course, is normally when you go onto the website, what they will also show you is they'll show you their route finder, which is a very, very popular application. You'll also get that for your smartphone as well. But as you can see, the AA have kind of changed, haven't they, over the years? I think we always considered them for a long time to be just a breakdown organisation, but looking here, they seem to do just about everything when it comes to motoring. Everything from car insurance, cracked windscreen, all the way through there to driving in floods and heavy rain. That must be one of their sought vehicles, that Range Rover or Land Rover that's down there at the moment.
It is.
Fantastic. So, Sarah Dopson from the AA, she's in charge of fleet. She is the fleet manager. What she doesn't know about business and company cars really isn't worth knowing about. And we're going to be talking a little bit about financing as well in just a few moments' time. So if you think, well, how do I get the pennies together? If I go to a showroom and I look at a car and it's, shall we say, we'll look at a cheap car, shall we? 15,000, 20,000 pounds. Whew, God. I'm coming out a bit of a sweat here, even thinking about spending that much money. But how do you go about financing it? How do you go, what are the right ways of doing it? Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to keep the pound notes in your pocket, and you don't want to be driving something that's going to have high depreciation. So how do you protect yourself from that? We'll be looking at that in just a few moments' time. Now, right back at the very beginning of Business Connections Live, we were out and about with our cameras, and one of the very first guests that we had on the programme was a guy called Paul Bridgeland. He was from the Best of Guildford, an absolutely fantastic guy, a real big supporter of the programme. A couple of weeks ago, in fact, he invited us out to a couple of his networking events. Here's something, though, that we recorded with him, must be nearly 3-4 months ago. And we were talking about networking. We were at one of his events, and while we're talking about cars, strangely enough, we were at a BMW dealer. We were at Vines in Guildford. See? There's the link. And it was a fascinating night. We also met Ben Kench that evening as well. You'll see some of Ben Kench, who was actually doing part of the seminar. But it was all about networking. How should you be networking when you're a small to medium scale enterprise? When you're a small business, you're just starting off. What should you be doing when you go to a networking event? How do you actually portray yourself? Are you selling when you're getting there? Or are you collecting information? Or is it just a case of exchanging ideas and concepts and then hoping that something comes out of it at a later date? We joined, as I said, the Best of Guildford and Paul Bridgeland at this event at Vines. So here we are, we're at Vines in Guildford this evening. With me I've got Paul Bridgeland from the Best of Guildford. What are you doing tonight, Paul?
What am I doing tonight? We're getting a bunch of people together, hopefully for them all to meet lots of other people and do some business.
Now, networking is an important way to grow different businesses, isn't it? Do you think people get it right when they're out here networking? You once said to me, if you're not networking, then you should be.
I did say that, and I'll be sharing a few rules tonight, Steve. One of which is people have a tendency, if you look around the room behind you, to talk to people that they know. What I try and tell them is they're here to meet new people. They can talk to the people that they know anytime they like. So that's one of the things I'll try and get across tonight. The other thing is for people to walk up to people and introduce themselves, not to be shy.
Now, the Best of Guildford, how long have you been going?
We've been going now for about, in fact, I've just renewed my franchise for another 5 years, so 5 years in total.
And how many people are actually advertising on the website or are customers of yours?
Well, we're not about numbers as such. Obviously, we'd like to have more people on the site, but we've got about 180 people on the site, but we don't actually want too many more people. It sounds a bit corny, but we're all about quality, not quantity. So 180 is about fine, but we need to look after those people and make sure that they stay on the site.
What do they get out of it?
Interesting question, because the world is changing every year. Originally 5 years ago it was predominantly just a website. Now we've kind of metamorphosized. The website's a part of it, but Google is it's like trying to tame a tiger. It's a very difficult beast to deal with. So we're tending to do a lot more networking, more events. We run a big exhibition every year now as well, which we started 2 years ago.
You once said to me that it's not just about the website, it's not about networking, because what you are is an expert in verbal communication.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we used to call talking, yeah, basically, yeah. We used to call ourselves word of mouth specialists, which is
that's the line.
Sounds a bit pretentious, but it's a good term because it's all about talking to people and connecting people. You meet someone somewhere, they know someone else, and that's what makes the whole world go round. I know it sounds corny, but that's how business is done.
Listen, a lot of businesses watching this right now. If you had 3 bits of advice to give to them, what would those 3 bits of advice be?
Be positive, which I think anyone would advise anyone to do. I think with networking in mind, be consistent, be committed, and as Churchill said, the real key to success is to endure failure after failure, but remain positive.
So there we were then at Vines with the Best of Guildford, Paul Bridgeland, finding out about networking. Paul really is very knowledgeable. He is a, how does he describe himself? Spoken word expert, something like that. He's good at talking. Boy, is he good at talking. Anyway, so fantastic event. If you're at an event like that, no matter where it is in the UK as well for that matter, we are open for the invitations as well. We wouldn't mind actually coming up. All you've got to do is contact us right here on the website studio@businessconnectionslive.com. And incidentally, if you are watching this on YouTube at the moment, fingers crossed you are, then if you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well to get further information. We've got all sorts of things coming up in the new year, including some training courses as well, for that matter, that you can take part in or you can get involved with. Also, if you're watching it on the website, there are our actual website, which is www.businessconnectionslive.com. If you're having a look at the program there, then all sorts of different things will be taking place, and we'll give you tickets and also different events and stuff like that, and also training too. So it's always good to hear from you. Do let us know, and thank you very much for all the positive comments that we've had. Incidentally, over the Christmas period, I know that kind of dates this particular program, so if you are watching it in the blazing hot sunshine at the moment, but over the Christmas period, there are a couple of best-ofs of the programs that we've done so far. I've got a funny feeling that Sarah Dopson's going to be featuring in the second one, New Year. So if you want to sort of check out and find out the key points that you've maybe missed on this particular program, then you can watch it there. Sarah Dopson, she is head of fleet, the AA.
Yep.
At long last, I've got there, and I've kind of got the title right. So we've been talking about the kind of vehicles and the kind of schemes that you can be looking at the moment, what you should be considering as well. Let's talk about the financing. And I know you don't deal with individuals. No. But when individuals become small limited companies, then you do have some expertise and experience in that. At what point, if you're a limited company, what is the best approach then? And I know you're going to say talk to your accountant about this, but what in general is the best approach when it comes to financing a vehicle if it's essential for your business to be on the road?
Yeah, if it's essential business use, then I do think that having a company car scheme is probably the best way to manage that. The best way to go and do it as well is via a contract management company. So they will do everything for you. So they will maintain the car, they will service the car, they will provide the fines for the car, the license, the road fund license, etc. Sorry.
Yeah. You're right in the middle of it, weren't you? Yeah. So you're talking about, go to a contract management company and they will actually do everything for you.
Absolutely. So you'll outsource your requirements.
All right.
So although it's up to the individual company from a finance perspective, will need to speak to their accountant as to which is the best option for them. And if you're actually outright purchasing, you have to do that management yourself. So you're going to have to go out and find a service and maintenance repair dealership. You're going to have to go and find your own insurance. You're going to have to do all the administration work that comes along with the company car, whether it's from fines admin, whether it's from road fund licensing, retaxing the vehicles, MOT in the vehicles, everything like that. So 9 times out of 10, most companies go down the route of contract hire, so that's outsourced administration.
So when you're looking at it then, I mean, what people obviously don't want to do is, I was just sort of saying before we saw that piece with Paul there, what I don't want to do is I don't want to put a lot of my money that's in the business into a lump of metal that has a relatively high depreciation.
It does.
So what the best ways around that? I mean, you say go to a contract hire company. What can you claim back then when you go to a contract hire? Is it you can claim the VAT back that they're going to charge you?
Yep.
But is the vehicle seen as an asset, or is there an amount of money that you can offset against what you're paying?
There is. I mean, again, from a financial perspective, it depends whether you want the asset on your asset register or not, so on your balance sheet. If you don't want your asset on the balance sheet, you can go down a contract purchase route rather than a contract hire route.
All right. So in your and I don't want to put you on the spot, but is it horses for courses again? Is it everybody is always going to be slightly different? There isn't a right or a wrong?
There isn't a right or wrong. I mean, that's typical of what you see in the industry. Not one scheme will suit everybody, and it really will depend on what your organisation and what your company, your financial outgoings, your cash build-up, your cash value will dictate.
Typically then, if we are looking at vehicles, and there are some beautiful cars out there at the moment, and they just blow you away when you look. I mean, I'd love a Range Rover.
Yes.
I can't afford a Range Rover because the new ones are £70,000.
Absolutely.
And even the second-hand ones that are like 5 years old are £16,000, £17,000, £20,000. So how do you go about raising the money that for the vehicle that you would actually off your dreams, the one that you feel is going to be right for what you're doing? What's the best way of doing it?
The opportunity is to go to a manufacturer, so directly to a manufacturer, engage with them. They offer discount terms.
Really?
Based on volume. So even over 10 vehicles a year, you still get manufacturer discount terms. Also, a nominated dealer, so a local dealer within your area that will provide you with additional service, etc. They will also provide you with discount terms, and those discount terms then go towards the value of the vehicle, to decrease that value of the vehicle for you.
So they can actually do the deals then, because there's always this feeling, isn't there, that if you're going through a contract, the deal is the contract.
Yes.
And there is no discount on the actual overall price of the vehicle that you're starting from.
Yeah, no, manufacturer discount terms are taken from the overall price of the vehicle, and those are individual to you from the manufacturer, so it's not up to the leasing provider, it's up to you to be able to get those. The leasing provider will have nominated dealers, and they'll have additional discount that you can add on top of that, unless you want to nominate your own.
When somebody like the AA are bringing cars onto the fleet, tell me if I've been nosy now, but are they paying the full value for the vehicle, or are they paying a percentage of the value of the vehicle? And if they are, can a small business do exactly the same thing?
We're paying the full value of the vehicle, but a discounted price.
All right. And that's exactly how these lease management companies can do it?
Yes.
What about for small business when it comes to raising money? Is it very much a case of going to the bank and just getting the best deal you possibly can? And is cash the winning hand sometimes? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, all leasing providers can offer support, whether you've got one vehicle or whether you've got 10 vehicles, 100 vehicles, 1,000 vehicles, and the majority of leasing providers are actually bank owned. They'll have a funding panel that's behind them, so that you'll just pay a funding rate for that vehicle dependent on what your credit status is.
So what are they actually selling? Are they selling finance, or are they selling the vehicle?
Overall package. They're selling the finance and they're selling the management. The actual vehicle themselves is chosen for by you.
Are there, in any of these leasing schemes, and we've already talked about ones that are already sorted out as far as servicing is concerned, but are there things that you should be watching out for? Are there things that can trip you up when you're going through this? Are there some leasing companies that don't provide you absolutely everything, or are there others that provide you more than you really need?
Most leasing companies are typically the same. They'll offer the same product offering, which is the management of the actual vehicle. You just have to be careful with what they're actually offering. So one, the funding rate can fluctuate depending whether they're bank owned or whether they've got a panel, as I just said. You also need to look at what their excess mileage charges are, because that is decided by the individual leasing provider, not by the manufacturer. You also need to look at what their residual values are, so whether or not they hold each residual value of the vehicle, highly or not. So the lower the residual value, the more you're going to pay in a rental. The higher the residual value, the less that you're going to pay. And the residual value is basically what they deem that car to be in the term period you set it to. So if you set the car period to 3 years, they'll then value that car for what it's going to be worth in 3 years' time.
And when they do value it for what it's going to be worth in 3 years' time, is that pretty much a guarantee that that's what you'll get for that residual, or is that just the best guess on their behalf?
That's the best guess on their behalf.
Can you ever be penalised for that then when they get it wrong?
No, you can't be penalised, that's their risk.
It's their risk.
That's their risk.
I mean, it's a good way. So effectively what you're doing is, because, I mean, thinking about it, we're talking about 10 vehicles, 20 vehicles, 30 vehicles, but there are people who are going to be watching this who have got 5 vehicles, 3 vehicles, 1 vehicle. And they too are looking for, I mean, they don't have that bulk buy purchasing power, no, but they're looking for relatively similar deals. I mean, there's one particular brand at the moment that's out there that seem to be just trying to push their vehicles onto you. We won't go down that route, but you know.
I mean, for individuals going into a dealership, sometimes they offer a private personal contract hire. So if you've got a manufacturer that's got a contract hire company behind it, so I don't know, VW have got VW Finance behind it, or Peugeot Citroën have got PSA. They will look to putting you down through a private contract hire scheme, which is absolutely fine. It works exactly the same as a contract hire scheme, so you're paying a fixed monthly rental. You've got your RV, which is protected, so you're avoiding the risk. The only difference with that and a standard contract hire scheme is the fact that you either have to pay a lump sum deposit at the front end, or you'd have to make a balloon payment at the back end. So it's whether or not you have that deposit in cash.
And I suppose what people are trying to do all the time, they're trying to, I suppose, they're trying to put the balloon payment at the end, or they're thinking that by the time they get to the balloon payment, they can actually then get another vehicle and just continue with the ongoing monthly payments.
Yeah.
Is there any clever thought that they should have in their head when they walk into the garage? Is there anything clever they should be saying? Is there anything that they should be prepared for? You know, do a lot of people go along to dealers and manufacturers really underprepared to get the best potential deal out of the manufacturers?
It's more understanding the terms and conditions that they're going to offer for that particular vehicle if you go down a finance leased or a leased route. So as the excess mileage charges, they will put high excess mileage charges on the back end. You need to understand what your term and mileage is going to be so that you don't track those, and also what your damage recharge is going to be. Apart from that, I think everyone's pretty
And raising
sensible.
the funds, of course, what you're saying is that, you know, budget that in if you're going to raise the funds to purchase or not to buy the car.
Look at the whole life cost of that vehicle from start to finish. So understand what that fuel is, so what your average MPG is going to be, so what your fuel cost is going to be, whether or not you're going to fund the fuel yourself or whether you're going to put it on a fuel card. How much the service and
What are the
maintenance.
advantages between putting it on a fuel card and funding it yourself? Is it the fact that one is just like a credit card and that'll come back to the business for them to pay?
It will do, yeah. So a fuel card is something that is typically provided to high mileage drivers. A driver will get taxed on the fuel card, especially if they use it for private and business use. They will, the business will also be taxed on the fuel and the fuel that they spend, and national insurance tax. But there are benefits of obviously having a fuel card where you actually get discount from the pump prices.
All right, so a good idea to have. And
only if you manage it. You have to manage
you've got to
that
manage
fuel.
it properly.
Absolutely. You have to know what you're spending, where you're leaking fuel, where there's potential misusage, etc.
You touched on it there a moment or so ago about the different types of fuel, and we mentioned earlier on the combination, the cars, the electric and petrol, and then you mentioned just there petrol or diesel.
Yeah.
In your experience, for somebody who's doing, I mean, when do you stop thinking about petrol and go on the diesel? When do you start, or when do you start thinking about the different kinds of fuel your car's looking for? What are the criteria you should be thinking of?
You need to look at the MPG and obviously what the price per litre is. So typically for the last couple of years, it's always been diesel, because obviously they have a higher MPG, and the price is also being comparative to what it is on petrol. Over the last few years, it's come back.
There has been a swap, hasn't there?
There has been a swap, and it's now coming back in that actually petrol. So a lot of fleets typically that I was talking to within the industry, they actually only had a diesel fleet. They didn't have a petrol alternative. Whereas now it's coming back in that actually petrol is more favourable because the MPG is actually increasing on these sort of vehicles. You're getting more miles to the gallon, and actually the fuel price is actually lower than what it is a diesel vehicle.
Does it still excite you looking at the industry that you're part of and the developments that are going on there? I mean, I'm sure you're not a petrol head, but...
I'm not a petrol head, no, but I mean every day is a different day within the fleet world. That's what excites me.
And I would imagine as well that as each day is very different, because the fleet is so diverse as well that the AA have, then that too must also be quite interesting, the different personalities and characters of the people that are actually using the fleet. You've got everything from trucks on the road all the way down to...
Driving school.
And driving school, yes.
Yeah, so we've got the driving school, so absolutely. I mean, that is, I have a very complex fleet. It's quite broad, but it's interesting because you've got completely different aspects. You know, you're looking at vehicles like driving school, which are only on an 8-month term. We turn them around quite quickly. They're on a manufacturer buyback. Very low on commissioning costs, but high on refurb. And then you've got the other extreme, which is the trucks, which are used 24/7. They're manned 3 to 1. You know, there are £105,000 worth of assets there. So,
crikey.
And above. So
just remind us how big the fleet is again.
It's just under 8,000.
And they let you play with that, do they?
Yeah.
I think that's just fantastic. What a great train set that must be to actually be mucking around with. Listen, we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more in just a few moments' time. It is absolutely fascinating. If you are at the moment sitting there thinking, well, I'm still a little bit confused, don't worry, because at the end of the programme, Sarah's just going to give you the key things that you need to remember when it comes to making certain that you're getting it right when it comes to your company car and your business. And that really is very, very important. So that's still to come. So don't you dare go away at the moment. As I said, if you are watching on YouTube at the moment, please do subscribe to the channel. That's always a big help. Or if you want, you can also go to our website. That's businessconnectionslive.com. Just a few little notes here, people that are coming up in the near future. I'll just remind you before we have our news. We're not going to be live next week or the week after because of Christmas and also the New Year, but we're going to be back live, fingers crossed, on Wednesday the 8th of January. We're at Phil Smith. He's an entrepreneur and owner of Soundtrack to Your Life, or to your soundtrack to your. Oh, I see. They just told me in my ear, soundtrack to your.com. There we go. A community-based music discovery service. Thank you very much for that. On the 15th of January, back by popular demand, we got Steve Mills. He was the guy that was talking about LinkedIn, the prudent marketeer, this time talking about internet marketing. Very fascinating bloke. Went on one of his training courses just recently as well. He was talking about LinkedIn there. Couldn't believe it. One thing, if you know nothing about LinkedIn, check out groups. You can join up to 50 groups. It means that when you actually do a communication with somebody, you could actually be mailing out to 2 million people. Now, 1% of that back must be worth your business time. 22nd of January, we have Kevin Williams of Young Enterprise talking about the ultimate teenage business challenge. We're involved with that too. We judged some of their videos. And on the 29th of January, we'll have our guest Aaron Thompson, Digital Director of NatWest Bank, BizCrowd, the new free online community for UK businesses. They're going to be joining us here in the studio and talking about BizCrowd. You've probably seen their adverts on the television just recently. So that's all to come in January. We're all very excited here. But this evening, I've got Sarah Dopson. She is going to make it right now, Head of Fleet at the AA. We'll be back talking to Sarah in just a few moments' time. Right now, let's catch up with what's happening, and not very much actually. It's been happening in the news over the past 7 days. And here's Linda Pesant.
This is Business Connections Live with the business news for Wednesday, the 18th of December 2013. According to a survey by the CBI and Accenture, there is a warning that although companies are planning to hire staff at the fastest pace since the start of the financial crisis over the next year, this will not lead to big pay rises. However, employers will be looking to hire more staff on permanent contracts as opposed to temporary ones, dampening fears that Britain is becoming a nation of part-time workers. Inflation has fallen to a 4-year low of 2.1%, although recent energy price rises are yet to be accounted for. However, cost of living increases are still outstripping pay rises, with the last published figures showing wage growth at 0.8%. The Bank of England's interest rate setters have had to loosen their focus on inflation, maintaining ultra-low borrowing rates to help nurse the economy back to health. And it looks like expansion at Heathrow looms ever closer as the airport's chief executive, Colin Matthews, says that Britain needs a world-class hub airport to compete, and a third runway is the quickest, cheapest and surest way of connecting the UK to growth. Businesses are crying out for aviation action now. Political posturing would put the economic recovery at risk and threaten London's reputation as the world's leading city. And according to the communications regulator Ofcom, Britons spent an average of almost £150 more online shopping last year compared with the previous 12 months. The UK is also spending more online per person than any of the other major countries surveyed. Trust in online retailers seems to have fueled the boom, with 70% saying that they now felt more secure when paying for products online. And if you have any comments or views on these or any other stories, please contact us on all social media or email studio@businessconnectionslive.com.
Hello there, you're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company. Steve Hyler with you here. My guest this evening is Sarah Dopson. She's head of fleet for the AA, one of the largest, all the premier motoring organisations in the UK. Got affiliated across Europe as well, aren't you? So,
yes,
I mean, there's tentacles going everywhere.
There is, yes.
Yeah, so we've met that Edmund King, who is your president. He's a very nice man as well. My executive producer, she's just reminded me that, and I've got to tell you again because you've already said it, but I'll say it again because I don't mind, that you did win the Fleet Manager of the Year 2012.
I did, yes indeed.
What did you have to do that? Just be an all-round nice person?
Wishful thinking. You have to actually present in front of a panel of judges, which typically included the head of ACFO, so the chairman for ACFO.
Wow.
And
what
also a leasing provider.
It's the Association of Police Officers, isn't it?
That's ACPO, this is ACFO.
Oh, ACFO.
ACFO, which is for company cars.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We will find out. If someone can just do, if one of my many researchers can just find out what that information is. Yes, he says living in a dream world all of a sudden. Well, listen, congratulations. A tough challenge, I would imagine. How many were you up against to actually win that award?
On the evening, that's shortlisted to 5, but apart from that, then it's every fleet manager in the UK.
Crikey. So, well, listen, congratulations and well done. You were talking just before we had the news there about fuel cards, and
yes,
they sound like a relatively good idea, but there are pitfalls, aren't there?
There are. There's things that you need to look out for. So, although you may have a fuel card that's with a specific provider, you need to ensure that obviously the drivers are using the cheapest option at the pump, so making sure that they're not using premium fuels, that they're using the cheapest alternative. If you've got a provider that actually opens up to 99% of the forecourts, that to make sure that you're using supermarket fuel rather than motor services fuel. You can on some fuel cards fix the litrage to ensure that you've not got misusage. So we typically wouldn't look at anything less than 15 litres on the basis that could classify as a jerry can fill up, and also knowing your tank capacities, so you can actually limit them to the tank capacity, so that you know that if your tank only takes 45 litres and you're trying to put 50 litres in or 60 litres in, there's something going on there, whether it's you're doing a tank and a jerry can, or backfilling 2 cars at the services.
You were talking also, or you mentioned it, I've got it on my notes here. By the way, it stands for the Association of Car Fleet Operators.
Yes.
There. But you know that now, don't you?
I got the Association of Car Fleet, but I was like, oh, what?
Hey, listen, don't worry. Grey Fleet. That's the expression I've never ever heard before. I've never really understood what that meant, and it's come up here on our notes about this. So, grey fleet. What's a grey fleet?
A grey fleet is typically where a company is given a cash alternative for a car, but the employee can choose whatever car he wants to. So there's no policy as such around it. We actually have a policy, but typically there's no policy around it. They could have a 10-year-old car. You don't know whether it's serviced or regularly. You don't know whether it's got an up-to-date MOT. You don't know whether it's got business assurance attached to it. So although it's an opportunity to have it as a benefit, because obviously the driver's getting the money as a cash alternative, actually you're not managing that asset at all. In which case you could put the company at risk because of duty of care, because you're not physically managing that asset.
So you've got to be aware of that.
Absolutely. You know, put a policy in place to be able to manage it, so restrict the age of the vehicle. It's typically 4 years or 5 years, so you haven't got a vehicle out there that's an old F-Reg banger that's driving around that hasn't got hands-free, so that you're obviously restricting your mobile phone policy to ensure that obviously if it's less than 5 years, you're only going to have typically 1 MOT, and that the MOT then goes for the 4th and 5th year, that the servicing is going to be quite light and still covered under warranty, and just also asking them to prove that they've got insurance, so it's proof of the insurance certificate, and also phoning through to the insurance company to ensure that they've got insurance for business use, not just insurance.
I was going to say, from the employees or the employer's point of view, I mean, just what are the liabilities that come back when you've got somebody who's driving around in a company vehicle? Are they quite? I mean, are they quite significant? Are they?
They are. Yeah, it's quite high risk. So you run the risk of corporate manslaughter, which is quite high at the moment. If you're not maintaining your fleet properly, or you haven't put the correct policy in place, you haven't got a mobile phone restrictions, actually it goes down to the CEO of that company and the director of that company that could unfortunately face prison if you're not doing it correctly. So if unfortunately you have a driver that has an accident that unfortunately kills someone, knocks over someone, and they haven't got the appropriate insurance, and they were on a business job and they were on a mobile phone, then the prosecution will actually lay with the company, not with the driver.
Crikey. Listen, we're rapidly approaching the end. I mean, that hour has flown by. But what I would like you to do, I know it's a bit you've been dreading, I would like you to look straight down camera 3 over there and just really give us the highlights of what was spoken about over the last 60 minutes. I mean, we've whistled through so much information. One thing I would ask you is, would you come back on the programme again in the new year at some stage, and we'll do it all again?
If you'll have me, I'll be pleasure to come back.
Absolutely. So, Sarah Dopson then, she is head of fleet for the AA. So what are the key things that you need to be remembering when it comes to actually making certain that you're getting it right when it comes to company cars? Here's Sarah Dopson to tell you what you should be remembering.
Hi, I definitely ensure that you've got a policy in place, ensuring that the driver has actually signed that policy so he understands what he has to do and what his driver responsibilities are. Making sure that you understand what the whole life cost of that vehicle is from the outset, so knowing what your service maintenance costs are going to charge you. Understanding what your MPG is and what your fuel is going to be, and also ensuring that you understand from the outset what miles you're going to cover and what term of the vehicle, contract term of that vehicle, you're going to lease it over.
That concise and to the point, and that's what we like about it. Absolutely fantastic. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the programme. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour. It's been absolutely fascinating. If you are thinking about actually getting yourself a company vehicle, well, I hope we've given you some of the hints and some of the information that you actually need to go out there and make the right decision. It's everything down from contract leasing and everything else like that. I mean, an absolutely fascinating hour. I'm sure you found it thoroughly enjoyable. Listen, we've got two specials coming up over the Christmas and New Year period. We've got a special programme that's going to be going out on actually Christmas Day. It won't be live. It's going to be a highlights programme. We're splitting it in two. We'll be looking back over some of the programmes that we've done over the last 3 months or so, and then on New Year's Day we'll also be giving you another highlights programme, the best of, once again, of 2013. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's programme. Sarah, can I thank you very much indeed for being part of the programme. It's been an absolute pleasure. Don't forget, if you are on the YouTube website, please do subscribe to the website. That would be absolutely incredible. And if you're watching on businessconnectionslive.com, well, don't forget to sign up and become a member. From me, Steve Harland, and Sarah, it's bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.